go. Yeah, cool. How's it going, everyone? This is Security Unfiltered, Episode 2, where today we're going to be talking about certifications versus experience versus degrees. What is better? What's the differences? What does these things and items give you? That are above the other two. Um, so let's talk about it. So certs, Derek, you have so many certs. You have way more than me, probably 3 times more than me. Are they worth it? In your opinion, are they worth it?
So I think that in certain situations they are, right?
It's a loaded question.
Yeah, certain situations they are, right? And so much goes into this, right? Because say you're trying to get into IT and you're just trying to differentiate yourself, right? Between somebody who may not have the experience and somebody who may. Well, having a certification definitely helps you level that playing field, but at the same time, it leaves a little bit to be desired when it comes to actually performance and having experience, which we're going to talk about. But as someone myself who around about this time, I think I have around 17 certificates.
Whew.
I started getting them around 2009, A plus, Net plus, Security plus. Went down to Windows 7, MCITP route with enterprise administration, Windows 7 configuration 680, and then
Man,
networking, right? Cisco, right? I got the CCENT, then the CCNA, then the CCNA security, and then the CCNP, and none of those
man.
helped me get a networking job, right? Because the idea was it's like, hey, I need a networking job, and every single job posting I saw was like, hey, well, we want you to have 2 years of experience, even if it's a junior networking role.
You mean to tell me you're not a network architect right now with all that, with all them certifications?
So what's funny is that I actually went into security to find a way to get into networking, right?
And
Because
now
it
you're
was like,
here.
yeah, exactly, right. It was like, well, they hacking through the network, so maybe I can tell them that I can help protect the network by being a security guy, right? Because getting in on the switching and the routing side was just too difficult, right? And then I did end up getting a network engineering job, but then they stuck me on SCCM for 90% of my role. And
It's
they
horrible.
they would let me mess with the switches, once every 3 months, and then by that time, people start coming at me to be an SCCM lead, and I'm like, well, hell, I might as well go, where they want me, and that's what it is. But yeah, so certifications can be helpful, but whether or not they're useful is going to depend right on your situation. So uh, that's my my quick little rant about that, but it definitely has some value. But I wouldn't say that it's going to give you a golden ticket.
Yeah, I think certifications are kind of like that first step in the process, right? So let's say you don't have experience with, certified ethical hacking or anything like that, right? What's a good cert that can kind of, get your feet in the water, kind of get used to the terminology, the processes, the methods, and from there, you really build your skill sets up from there. The certs
Yeah,
are supposed to be like the foundation of where you're going in the next level, right? Like the OSCP, as hard as it is, as difficult as it is, not only is it proving your skill sets and proving that you can do this work, that you are more than qualified for penetration testing and whatnot. Um, I always see certifications as a foundation. And so, it's like, okay, I validated this experience. I validated these skills with this cert. Where do I go from here? Where do I build from here? But then, we get into an area where um, is the knowledge that you're gaining from the certification valuable to where you want to go in your career? And how much does that certification cost compared to competitors and compared to the potential income that you would generate or that you would get by, potentially changing a job into that line that you would want, right? And so, the first cert that I'm thinking of that kind of falls into this category that we absolutely should touch on is the CEH. Okay, when I took that cert maybe 5 years ago, I don't know, it might have been 3 or 4. It was $300. I had someone that I'm mentoring go and look into the CEH, and I tell everyone it's far more important to know the information that you need to know for that cert rather than actually getting that cert because it is so extremely expensive. I don't want to tell so I personally I don't feel right telling someone you need to go get this $1,000 cert to elevate your career in a way that gets you to where you want to be. I don't feel right doing that because I wouldn't spend $1,000 on a cert.
Not even if you paid for it.
Not if the company
Definitely if you
paid
didn't
for
pay
it.
for it. Yeah, exactly. If the company
Okay,
pays
yeah,
for
yeah, but like we're talking about,
it.
what company at this point is going to pay for a junior or even a mid-level person to take a $1,200 cert, and if they fail it, you have to pay again. There's no discount.
If they're out there, please send us that information. We would
Yeah,
like to
yeah,
praise that organization.
yeah, yeah. Like, man, and on top of that, these boot camps that everyone is selling, like everyone under the sun is selling a boot camp to get a cert, right?
Yeah.
Um, and some of these certifications, I would argue that you absolutely need a boot camp of some sort. Some of these more difficult certifications, I would say something with ISC squared. If you're going for like your first ISC squared certification, and you just don't know the the format of the questions or what they're looking for, or how to really answer it, or how to think about those questions, I think that's where boot camps really bridge that gap and give you the best shot at passing your first time around. A full disclosure, I did a boot camp for the CCSP. I was studying for a number of months before my first attempt with the CCSP. I did the boot camp, and maybe about 2 weeks later, I want to say I took the exam and I failed it. I failed it by I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 points, something like that. Like it wasn't like a considerable like, oh no, I just bombed by 30 points, like below where I needed. It was like I was within striking distance. So I went back to the drawing board. I took everything that I learned. I go in depth with this in my blog, like very in depth, and that's very intentional because I really want everyone to know the process that I use to succeed. And I took it the second time around and I killed it. I mean, that was the exam was so easy to me the second time around, and that's not to brag or anything, but I knew what I was getting myself into that second time around. The
Less
first time
anxiety.
around, yeah, yeah, I have test anxiety for sure.
Yeah. That's one thing we can talk about is leading into the actual exam. What are some of the things that you can do? And directly after an exam, right? Because a lot of times if you do fail, right? You got to start that process to get back on that horse, right? And take advantage of all that knowledge that you just saw, right? You
Right.
just actually went through the experience. So how do you capture all of that so that it helps you again when you take it in a week or 2 months or whatever, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I I think that was probably the biggest. I would say the biggest difference maker for me the second time around was because when I went through the first time around, I was smart enough to kind of catalog the problems in my head, not necessarily the questions per se, but the types of problems that I was running into, the domains that gave me the most trouble, how they gave me the most trouble, like where I was struggling with, and I took copious notes. As soon as I failed that exam, I sat in their lobby and I just
Mhm.
wrote down everything that I could think of. And
So so s-
they weren't
so
looking
when
at me, so
so when did you start that process, right? Of after you get out of the exam, right? To know that, damn, I got to get this on paper, right? Whether it's a voice recording or writing it on a piece of paper, what do I recall? What's fresh in my mind? What did I feel strong with? What did I feel weak in? Because I don't think that that's natural, right? That's a progression thing, and I don't even
right.
know when I picked that up, right? It could have been somebody who provided that information for me, and I adopted it. But I try to tell that to everybody now, right? It's because it's so vital, right? So do you recall, like, was it just something that came natural to you to start doing, or did you kind of get some tips on that from others?
I would say that it was more of a natural thing for me
Hmm.
because just with my mentality, I'm always looking for ways to improve, and
Hmm.
areas to improve on. And so, like, even when I like leave an interview for a role, I'll take notes on what I messed up in that interview just because that's how I am. Right. And when I am studying for an interview, I do the same thing. I take, a whole bunch of notes, review everything beforehand, go into the interview. If I killed it, cool. If I didn't, take maybe some mental notes or in OneNote. OneNote is just my savior, basically. I mean, like that thing is awesome. Um, go into OneNote and write down a few topics that, I bombed that I just didn't know. So, one thing I think is very important is how to determine the value of the certification for you. And I think for everyone, if you're getting into IT, right, the foundational certs are valuable to everyone. So that's A plus if you have no IT experience, network plus, security plus, cloud plus, from CompTIA. Those are very good foundational certifications that are very much worth the money, that really give you that base set of knowledge that not only do companies recognize, they see that cert, they know the kind of knowledge that you have, but you can build from there. You can build up to, being an admin, being an engineer, or something like that. But I didn't mean to cut you off, but there's a lot of different organizations out there. How do you choose which one is maybe the best for you, that's going to provide the most value?
So I was going to ask, what kind of background did you had before you even had certifications, right? Because so for instance, for me, right, I got into computers right after we graduated high school, way back in the year 2000, and for me, AOL was big. These chat rooms were popping up, right, and
Yeah.
AIM, right, and um, a friend of the family had provided us a computer, and the thing just kept dying, right, and I would give it back to him, and it would take like 6 or 7 months before I would get it back, and I would get it back, and it would work for like 3 months, and then it would go dead again, and it came back 6 months later, and I'm like, I can't deal with this. I got to
Man.
learn how to fix this myself. And so I had some friends who were into gaming and overclocking, right? They started to school me on, well, this is a motherboard. Here's your memory slots, here's your hard drives, etc. And that kind of got me an introduction into,
Right.
computers. And I didn't actually get into the CompTIA Plus stuff until like 8 years after that. So by then, I was already, a hardware monkey, right?
Right.
I can pop open the side panel and just get to it, right? I
Yeah.
was doing front side bus stuff. I was doing soldering stuff. So for me, when I got into the A plus, it was more of a, oh, this is what that's called. Oh, that's what that's called. Oh, this is what that's capable of. Okay, so it was helping me sort all this information I had been gathering.
Yep.
And so when I actually was able to start going for my first positions in IT, right, it was like, hey, we need a desktop tech that's going to run around with a USB, plug in stuff and do stuff. And then they actually started to try to, probe how deep my knowledge was, right? I actually, it wasn't just like being a paper tiger, which is what they used to call it back in the day when you had certifications, but no actual practical knowledge, right?
Hmm.
I can actually start talking about my experiences with doing things with my hands. And they were like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, no, yeah, this guy, we could bring him in to pop in USBs
Right.
because, he's talking about things that he's done before. So, how would you say is, or what would you say are the things that someone can do even before we even talk about the A plus knowledge or the security knowledge or going to school and getting a degree or getting that experience, right? Because you can always find a team of guys who are into IT and just learn from them, right? Learn how to talk about IT, learn about
Right.
what matters so that you actually have that ability to, have discussions with people you're going to interview with.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my own experience, kind of how I got into it. I don't have my A plus certification or my network plus. I have my security plus, but No, neither of the other two. Um, I got into it just by building computers, doing research, watching videos on YouTube, kind of just figuring it out as I went. Like I talked about in the last episode how like I was literally making like $400 a month in college doing a a basic help desk job. But my first job in college was like a desk receptionist or something, like nothing related to IT. And so I was using that job to build my computer. And then I built my computer. And maybe about a year later, I landed my first like real IT help desk job. And, the only way that I was able to do that was because I was able to just talk about my computer that I built and,
Mhm.
the experience that I had with troubleshooting it. And that really, that's all that they were looking for.
Sure.
Someone that you know would be presented with different problems, didn't quit when presented with problems, worked really hard to resolve them, and knew how to troubleshoot a computer.
Yes.
And you get that experience by doing it. And so a cert's not going to help you with that, right?
Yeah,
It's not.
how do you deal with that postcode era, or
Right.
trying to boot your first computer and it actually doesn't power on, right?
And it blue screens 3 times back to back, and you have no clue why because you just dropped like $1,500 on this computer, and now it ain't working, and now I'm frustrated.
What's an IRQ message? What the hell is going on here? It's yeah, and so I think that that there's a gap, right? That bridge that you were
Yeah,
talking about, right? So if you're going if you're in high school right now, you're like, I want to get into IT eventually, and maybe I'm going to go to college and take some IT path or whatever, or some security path. And you're like, well, how am I going to get my first, job, my first experience? You have to limit your scope, right, to projects, right? Maybe you create a YouTube channel where you're building your own machine, or you're doing reviews of technology, right? You want to show that you actually have a passion about IT, because again, if I'm hiring and the person is has no experience in security, I want to see that they have that fire, right? I want to see that this is something that they find exciting, that they're passionate about, because I know that, like Joe said, when they come up against a problem, they're not going to quit. That's one of the worst qualities and attributes that I think that you can have in IT is when you're challenged, that it actually frustrates you. It should actually you should get that Spider-Man tingle going, right? You should be like,
yeah,
oh, this is exciting. What is this? Like,
yeah.
driver, you really think that you're going to defeat me? No, I'll figure you out, buddy. That helps, right? And not
Right.
everybody is always kind of I guess programmed that way. But it's always good to try to adopt qualities that will help you be more successful. So be curious, number one. Um, Curiosity will always help you, especially when getting into a space just like like IT or security. Uh, but yeah, uh, what were some of your experiences? I guess in trying to sell, those early certifications. I guess when getting a position or your first job, because I can remember myself, like, I think I had the A+ when I got my first desktop technician job,
Yeah.
and then in that role I got my Network Plus next, and then I got Windows 680 for
Mm.
configuring Windows 7 and imaging. And so it was like, damn, what can I get now, right? I need to, I'm making $15 an hour. I got these three certs. Where should I be looking for my next position? How much pay should I be getting? Should I be willing to accept, a sideways, role when it comes to pay just to get more experience, or do I go for, a $5 increase? How do you kind of manage those early certs and then actually, opportunities?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question. Um, so I didn't get my security plus until maybe a year to a year and a half after college, like in a job for a year and a year and a half. Um, and so I got basic IT jobs after college just from having experience with help desk in college. Um, And then from there, I discovered security. I decided I wanted to get into security, that is where I wanted to go. And so with all of my research that I did, Security Plus was basically the best cert out there to kind of, get my feet wet in security. So I started studying for my Security Plus on my own dime, on my own time, while working this job, doing IT stuff, but security was really a second thought or an afterthought at best at that company. And so, I was trying to get security roles while I'm there because I want to get into security. So I need to get security experience. But the only way to get this experience is to have access to these technologies. But there's no way for me to have access to these technologies because they're way too expensive. And so, um, I fell into this conundrum of that situation. And so I just kept going. To be quite honest, I just kept going and I kept on working to earn more security work and tasks at work at my current job on top of the work that I was already doing. So I already had I had a position. It was an app specialist position and I had work that I had to do every single day. Like there was no way I could get around it. And if one of my customers decided to call me, like some of those customers, I had to take their call no matter what. If they called me at midnight, I had to take their call. That's just how it was, and that's how I wanted it for my own customers because I have a higher level of customer service that I just expect from myself. Um, so while I'm doing that, I'm getting more security work while at work, getting my experience, doing vulnerability management and whatnot. But it was still very difficult for me to get a job because people still wanted me to have experience with these crazy technologies that I could never get my hands on. And
Do
that's
you
when,
Yeah. And real quick, so do you think there's a disconnect between what security professionals are being asked to know when getting that position? Is it more about technology and tools or about the actual knowledge, right? Because like you said, unless you get a vendor related
yeah,
certificate, right,
yeah,
you're learning security from the foundational,
right.
CIA standpoint, not necessarily what their command line looks like or their command looks like. So, and you're expressing that difficulty, right, of being able to say, well,
It
hey,
was
I'm doing
very
everything.
difficult.
Yeah. So I guess how do we fix that problem, and where can we help others like understand that security ends up being overly focused on tools,
Yeah,
and vendor tools, right? Um, and just to name out some, right? Carbon blacks and cyber reasons or CrowdStrike stuff
logarithm,
or
Splunk,
Nessus, Q Radar, right? All these different vendors out here doing the same thing,
right.
but they have their own little branding on
They have
their
their own
interface,
flavor. Yeah,
and so you will actually be stopped from getting a position because your experience is in this SIM and not in that SIM. When the
yep,
UI is the same, the RPC calls are the same, the WMI calls are the same, the
yep.
APIs do the same thing, and the file and everything else is in the same place. So that sounds incredibly frustrating.
I think, man, it was difficult. It was really hard, and to be quite honest, like I said before, I mean, I interviewed almost every single day in some way. It was phone interviews just nonstop, and uh, after 2.5 years of that, I didn't really want to interview anymore.
Yeah.
And after about a year, maybe a little bit over a year, I decided, okay, you know what? I just got my bachelor's degree. It's not IT related or anything like that. I got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Um, what about a master's degree, right? And what value would a master's give me? Would it give me the leg up in the industry that I'm looking for to just get into security? Um, And so I went through the whole process of choosing a master's degree that wasn't extremely expensive, that gave me really good quality education. I mean, like I wanted a really good hands-on program. I didn't want to know the theory that I could read about in my Security Plus book. I didn't
Yeah.
care. Like
Yeah.
that stuff is great, but I can read a book for that. Just give me the book and I'll read it. Teach me how to actually hack a Windows server. Teach me how to hack into Linux, teach me how to do privilege escalation. And so I found a master's program that that worked for me, that was probably half the cost of the other universities, the other programs that I was looking at. It wasn't a very well known school. The school's called Capital Technology University. Just from that name, it probably sounds like it's a technical school, that you get like a program completion certificate or something from, right? But it's not. It's a fully accredited university. That was their cybersecurity program was actually made with the help of the NSA and NASA and all these other big agencies that you can think of that wanted a pipeline for candidates to come into their organizations. And so they designed the program for things that they're looking for, and it's all real world stuff. And so, I did that. I did that program. I think it took me like 2.5 years to get the degree. It was very well worth it, I felt. About a year into the program, maybe 6 months into the program, is when I interviewed with you and I got hired. But even in your role, even in the role that I applied for, I mean, R1 was still looking for, logarithm and carbon black and all this other stuff. And I think the only way that I got in was because you had the mentality of, I can teach you all of that stuff. Do you know the basics? Do you have the right mentality? Do you have the right work ethic? And I think as an industry, we really need to switch from looking for people that have experience with a tool, into having just the right mentality, having the right kind of foundational experience.
I believed in you, Joe.
Yeah, well, you were the only one out of the 200 plus that I interviewed with over 2.5 years.
You intimidated him. You were too awesome.
I doubt that. I doubt all of
Hey,
that.
hey, we have the ability here to say whatever we want it to be because, hey, you know, they didn't bite. So
They didn't, and it's their loss, because some of
yeah,
those companies I will never apply for again because
yeah,
of how they treated me in the process.
yeah. The
I
experience, yeah,
I had people laugh at me in my face on, like, I don't think it was Zoom at the time. It was something else. It was like a Skype call or something. The guy would laugh at me when he asked me a question. I said, "I'm not sure. I would look it up. I would use Google. I would use my resources around me. I would use the team." And he just laughed at me. Oh, I will never work for your company.
yeah.
And I will never go anywhere that you will ever be.
That's disconcerting to hear. Yeah, and so unfortunately, sometimes you get put in front of people who don't really understand what their role is in evaluating talent or
Yeah,
potential. And if you don't fit their narrative or what they're looking for, then it's oh ha ha ha, and so that's unfortunate.
yeah,
Um, you brought up so when you were talking about school and you thought it was beneficial. I get and we can talk about these pipelines, right? Because there are certain groups that are plugged into these degrees because yeah they want to get a pipeline of talent coming to them, so they're kind of doing an
right,
early onboarding for what kind of culture and kind of people that they want. But I guess, like you said, there's a disconnect between that theoretical knowledge, right? That knowledge that you can get out of a book versus what's practical, right? And I think
yeah,
that's where, the experience versus certificate versus degree kind of debate kind of it falls across these different lines, right? It's because you're not going to get everything you need from any one of these, right? It's
right,
almost as if you need to do all of them if you can. But I would say, as somebody who I didn't try to go back to school to get a degree in IT until I was a manager in security because I wanted to pursue my master's because I thought that well, in order for me to become, a potential CISO or whatever it was that I might have wanted to be in the future, that having that paper, that master's or whatever would just help, solidify, my journey.
right.
So, I already have a degree in creative writing. And, I'm like, well, hell, outside of creating policies, this is not really giving me any benefit when I tell people that hey I can come in and do all this technical stuff and they like well, I see you have a degree here in creative writing and fiction, right? So is everything you're telling me that's on your resume a lie? And I'm like, damn. I'm like, you came for the kill shot.
Oh my
No,
god.
hey, you got to be
Someone
able to.
actually said that to you, man?
Hey, you said somebody laughed at you. You get all kinds of people who are like,
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
this might sound odd, but I'm going to ask you this. And it's one of those things where it's like, no, I never thought I was going to be in a 9 to 5. I never thought I was going to be in corporate America, right? I used to grow up thinking I was going to do music and I was going to do creative writing and I was going to do screenplays and I was going to make movies. And the last thing I wanted to do was show up and fix people's mailboxes for a living, right?
Yeah,
And when you start in IT and you start fixing printers, right, your family, I mean, like your first experience and support is with your family. Because as soon
yeah,
as they let the rest of the family know that you're the computer guy, right, you're getting questions about grandma's mouse, auntie's, fax machine. Hey, your cousin wants to know if you can create them an app. It's like, hey, I do
right.
hardware. Like that doesn't mean I know software development, right? They like, I got a good
Doesn't mean I
idea
know
for yeah.
everything.
That's the
Man,
assumption, right? Oh, you know computers, huh? So I but so it's really interesting where these questions can come, especially when you're trying to get into IT and where it can lead you. So getting your degree, right, it kind of gives you some foundational knowledge. And I think that to me, I ended up dropping out of my degree. I had like, I think 5 courses left, but literally all my courses were non IT related, right?
mm,
They wanted me to take English again and math again because I had got my degree 15 years earlier. So it was all that stuff again. And I'm like, yeah, I'd rather learn PowerShell to a
yeah,
advanced level or Python, right? I'd rather learn something else than give 30 hours into some stuff that I already proved that I knew 20 years ago, right?
right.
And so I already had the manager job too. I'm like, well, so having a bachelor's in IT security will probably get me to the point where I can get a manager's role in security. So, what value am I going to really get out of this degree other than, again, just having this be on paper, right? But in terms of actual knowledge that I'm going to practically apply, I'm like, I've been doing this every day now for 3 years hardcore, right? WannaCry, NotPetya, right?
Hmm.
Other incidents, right? It's like,
That was like
what,
my
what
first week
yeah, yeah.
at R1. That was like my first week.
So what you're teaching me about, how you're supposed to do vulnerability and patch management, like it's already been well ingrained into my mind. So then it becomes, okay, well, is a bachelor's or something like that more so for, I guess, early phases of your IT security career versus late stages? And then you say that for late stage stuff, go for a master's, right? Because I don't think anybody gets a master's in cybersecurity who wants to top out as a security analyst,
Right.
just in my opinion, right? So it's kind of like, where do you also align that, right? Who is a master's good for in cybersecurity?
Yeah. So I think that's really an interesting question. Who is it good for? I think that it is good for anyone that is looking to, if you eventually want to get into management or upper management and be a CISO or something like that,
Hmm.
in order to get into those kind of circles, I mean, you need a master's. You need a master's in cybersecurity, or you need a MBA, and you need an MBA from a good school. Then and I've talked to people that I know that are CISOs, and that's what they've told me. Because I already have my master's, and my goal is to maybe someday I'll be a CISO, and my CISO friends, I asked them, should I get an MBA? I already have my master's, but like I'm hearing over here, I'm hearing on the left side that you need an MBA no matter what to be a CISO. And then I see all these CISOs over here that, have masters in English and, all this
Hmm.
other stuff. And, that's fine. Like you could still know cybersecurity and have a master's in English. But what do I do? And I was told, as long as you have the master's, you're fine. And so I've always viewed like degrees as not necessarily future proofing, but it's as close to future proofing as you can be. in terms of like checking a box that someone may have, right? And you don't know what that box is going to be. You don't know if the box is going to be there when you apply to be a senior manager somewhere or whatever it might be, right? But I've never had someone look at my resume and say, "Oh, you have your masters. We're not looking for people with masters." I've never heard someone use that against me.
It comes up when you give your salary requirements.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, because you then fetch a higher price point.
It so all of these certifications and the degrees, they demand a higher price point. They do,
Yes.
and rightly so, because you know what? To be point blank, you're investing in yourself. All this stuff that we're talking about, the certifications and the degrees, I view it all as an investment in myself. And every investment that I have ever made in myself always yields the highest payout. That's how I view it.
How do you break down the value of that investment when you say looking at a certificate versus a degree? Because one of the things that I started to see in the pursuit of getting my finishing my bachelor's, right, and the second bachelor's, and then trying to pursue that master's was the time, right? It was like, so wait a minute, I can probably give 50, 60 hours to a CISSP
Hmm.
and probably get that, right? But what does 50 or 60 hours get you when you're going for a degree, right? Does it even get you a course, right?
We're talking
Because
about credit hours or just real hours.
yeah, right. No, real hours, right? Hours with your hands on the keyboard, your hands in the
Yeah,
book, you're underlining, you're getting notes, you're retaining the knowledge, right? To me, the reason why I rank certifications and we can talk about our ranks, right? Experience to me is first, certifications
of
is
course.
second, degrees are third. Just because number one, like you said, it's future proofing for the degree, but how does that degree evolve over time in terms of the knowledge that it gave you when you're 10 years in the future and now everybody's moved to the cloud and that degree didn't cover cloud or microservices, right? Or containerization, right? So now you have to either go back for an updated degree or you have to get a certification anyway that's going to help you fill in that gap in your knowledge or the experience, right? Now, I would never tell somebody not to get a degree. I think that if you can have a degree on your resume in the field that you're going to work in, get it, right?
Yeah,
But if you have been lucky enough to get into that career path, get experience, and you're starting to get certifications, you really have to think hard about whether or not it's going to make sense for you to go back to get a degree because the return on your investment of time, cost benefit, right, is a lot lower, right? Because well, you're already there and you're doing it, right? So does it make sense to become more of a specialist? Or does it make sense to go ahead and get some knowledge that would have helped you get into the position that you were in the first place?
yeah, yeah. So I think degrees, like I said, are really good at almost future proofing, and then certifications are the adjustments that you do in your career. So
Yeah.
I got my degree in cybersecurity. I got my master's in cybersecurity. We did touch on cloud in my program. We didn't like dive into AWS or Azure or GCP, but we learned the basics of cloud really. And we dove into other topics more extensively. Well, now, in 2021, uh, this cloud thing, is blowing up. It's getting a lot bigger. And in terms of IT, uh, if you don't have, those certifications or that knowledge, you know, you're going to be in a bad situation. You're not going to be able to grow in your career. You're not going to be able to, switch lanes in your career or anything like that. And I think that that's really how you have to think of it. So you get these degrees, and I'm not telling anyone to go and, take out student loans and pay for these degrees, that cost 20, 30, $40,000 a year or something like that, right? Like I'm not gonna tell someone to do that. Um
That's a lot of money.
it is. It's an extreme amount of money, but that's just how I think of it. I think of it as a long-term investment. and then I increase my investment by doing these different certifications to further diversify and build up a skill set.
Yeah. Yeah. And everybody is going to have different experiences, right? So the good thing about having a podcast and you having your opinion and I have my opinion and everybody who listens have their own opinion, right? So we're not ever saying that, you know, it's this way and that's the only way, right? You guys can be that use case that can hop on one day and provide us additional context and a point of view for why you think, you know, X is better or Y is better, right? But you know, Joe and I, as people who are very, you know, observant, and we grew in our positions with the idea of, well, that help wasn't really there for me, right? So we always wanted to see, you know, each step of the way, we were like, okay, I done made it to this rung. What do I need to do in order to make sure that if I get a buddy who wants to join me, that I can help him get
Right.
to where I am as quick as possible, right? Because I don't want him to have the wasted energy, the wasted motion that I did. And so when we're providing this insight and our opinions, right, it's a lot of times based on anecdotal evidence, but it's anecdotal success, right? And a lot of times with any success, there's an element of luck. And we're going to have to touch on those because sometimes you just get a position again because you my very first job, this is how I got it. I had an interview at this proctoring place, right, where I was going to watch people take a test for a living. So how exciting is that? So the job was going to be me staring at a screen of 15 people taking a test, and I'm supposed to watch to make sure they're not cheating. And my shift is a 10-hour shift. So the amount of head scratching, chin scratching, and other exciting things taking place on a day-to-day basis was, trust me, it was the best experience I ever had in my life.
Riveting.
Yeah, if you can't tell that that's sarcastic, then I'll go ahead and just help you a little bit. But I hop on the elevator. I have my little resume and my little portfolio, whatever, and I hop on the elevator. And the elevator's getting ready to close. And this guy, he's going through the man trap and he's running towards the elevator, right? And I do my thing. I stick my hand between the door. I catch the elevator for him, right? And he's like, oh man, thanks. He's like, no, no problem, man. I'll lose an arm for anybody. And he's like, I really appreciate that. So we get off on the same floor. And then we walk into the same uh you know, they have, when you get on the floor, they have these doors that you can go on for different businesses. We go into the same business. And then I sit down. He walks behind the desk, grabs some files, and they're like, your 830 is here. And then they point to me. And then he looks at the resume and he's like, your name's Derek? I'm like, yeah. He's like, my name's Derek. He says, come on back here. And trust me, I didn't have to do much the rest of the time, right? For whatever reason, it was like, I'm gonna give you a shot. And
Yeah.
that's luck. Right. And it's crazy, right? Because I've been in situations in which it's the opposite, where I went out of my way to show that I was capable. I've had degrees, I've had way more experience than you thought that would have been needed for a position. And it just wasn't the right fit.
Hmm.
And you know, unfortunately, you don't really know what it is sometimes, but there's an element of luck, right? That I think that is going to follow you, right? But the thing is that just be prepared because when that opportunity arises, you want to be successful, regardless if it was luck or because you actually, you know, had the chops to do it.
That you're capable. That's really at the end of the day, that's what this experience, the certs, that's what the degree, all help you prove, right? And so you got to figure out kind of where you're at. If you don't have the experience to get into security and you're in help desk, what can you do to show that you're capable of, you know, researching a security issue, dealing with a malware outbreak, dealing with patching and things like that, right? You got to really you got to have a realistic uh, step and view of your career of where you want to go. So you're at help desk. Let's say you have dreams of being a CISO someday. Well, you're not going to jump from help desk into CISO. So you need to find a security analyst role. What does that role look like to you. Do some research, maybe even what the salary is. You know, you need to have a salary range in mind and look at the skills that they're looking for and start working towards getting those skills. And these certs may be able to help you in that way. The
Joe, real quick,
yeah,
what you're saying is key. And also, sometimes on those job descriptions, they'll put the technology they're working with. Now, whether that's smart or not, because you're actually helping external threat actors understand that, oh, you're using this and this and this.
right.
Oh, you guys are using SolarWinds? Oh, okay, cool. Right.
Yeah,
It can actually give you a leg up, right? So that when you do actually have that interview, you can actually know a little bit about some of their technologies, right? And speak to a little bit better. So,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe I mean, this is a little bit extreme, but maybe even looking, you're seeing these technologies like carbon black, CB protection, all these other technologies that they may be having, right? And maybe you go look up online and see how you can get like an admin guide to one of these solutions. And so in the interview, you know, even if they don't bring it up, before you leave that interview, you say, "Hey, by the way, I noticed that you had this technology on the job description. I went ahead and found an admin guide. I read through the admin guide. So I know a little bit about that technology. So I'm not completely, useless. You're showing that initiative. You're showing that you're capable of learning. You're more than willing to learn, and that might be something that separates you from someone that maybe even has the direct experience with that technology. Will it be difficult for you to be better and hired over someone with that direct experience? Probably, but it's possible. If maybe you're a better uh, fit personality wise, maybe you jive better with the team. That's a big thing too in security. We need to have people that really work well together on our teams.
yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Excellent point. Administrator guides, going to their website of these vendors, they make a lot of things available.
Yeah.
Bright Talk, some of these web conference or these webinar websites, right? That talk about security, right? That talk about IT risk and compliance, right? They're providing free webinars, and a lot of times they're sponsored by specific vendors. And so those vendors actually want to talk about how their solution helps organizations solve specific problems. But just watching one of these webinars, they help you understand, a little bit about that product, so that if you're ever put in a position where you have to, speak, to what a SIM is and what is it used for, right? Uh, that's another leg up, right? And it doesn't really cost you much other than the time and your preparation, because the more prepared you are, the better.
Right. Yeah, you should never go into an interview unprepared. You should have read that job description already. You should know all the technologies in there that they're looking for. You should have, things pulled out in your head from your own experiences that you can talk to each one of those points or multiple or most of those points, I mean. Um, so, if we had to rank these, you already talked about your ranking. Obviously, you know, mine is going to be same as yours. Um, so
Is that Alexa?
yeah, man, that's Siri. She won't leave me
Okay,
alone.
so
uh, so I would always go with experience. Experience is always key for all of this, and it's always going to rule over certs and a degree. If you can't. There's only so much that the cert and the degree is going to teach you. You need to have that experience of when your tool did something that it wasn't supposed to and caused an outage, and it's like, oh shit, I gotta fix this or I'm gonna be fired.
yes,
like you know and then with the experience, the certs come in second for me, I feel. And I always view certs as that certification or that piece of paper is validating the knowledge that you have or the
yes,
knowledge that you're claiming that you have on your resume. And the degrees are more towards the future proofing. They're more towards like a more of a major milestone in your career education wise, right? That's how I view it. But a degree is never going to you're you're not going to be, walked out of the place or not get the interview because you have a master's. That's not the situation. You're getting the master's. You proved that you can do the workload. You proved that you had the ability to learn all that material and achieve, a certain standard that they have set forth.
Yep.
And so that is valuable. But, you know, when we're choosing certifications to talk about the value, I think cost also plays a huge part in it. And maybe someday down the line we could bring someone in, from one of these organizations, and that's what we talk about, right? Like, how are they figuring out that a security plus is $300, and you know these other certs, the CEH, is now $1,300? Like, what? What are we talking about right now? Like, what are we learning? Because when I took that CEH, it was multiple choice. It's not the OSCP.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is to make money.
Yeah.
And it's under the guise of preparing you, right? But from anybody's perspective, for the cost to go up like that, then the quality of the test should go up as well.
Yeah, the difficulty. I want to see the difficulty go through the roof. I don't want to see a multiple choice test for $1,300 when ISC squared tests are $600. Like,
Yep.
what? That's
Yeah.
double what an ISC squared cert is. And ISC squared is arguably more reputable than the other cert. I mean, you got to be kidding me right now. What am I not seeing? And so I would personally, I would really love to hear someone like from that organization tell me, hey, this is why it's like this. And if there's a good enough reason, I'll go take the cert and I'll report back. Like, you know, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, definitely. Because again, we're dealing with people who probably don't have disposable income to that level, right? And and and
I know
and
I
and one of
don't.
the yeah, and the hardship that people have, right? You see it so many times. You see it on the forums. You see people who are saying, "Hey, I'm trying to figure out how to get into this space. What's my best path? Is it getting the cert? Is it going for the degree?" And it's always experience, right?
Yep.
But it's the chicken and the or the egg, right? It's well, how do I get any experience if I don't have experience? And how do I get experience for a entry level job when one of the main requirements is experience?
Yep.
And and like I said, it's going to be up to us and the community to start figuring out. Then, well, what do we do? Do we band together as a community, as a forum, and actually start building projects? Free projects, open source projects where people can actually get experience, right?
Right.
And we can say that, hey, we're building this web app, or we're going to do a simulated run on a particular made up organization, and we want to talk about their incident response. So let's do some tabletops, let's do some
Yep.
red team exercises, right? Where people who don't actually have this experience but they're studying, they could be a member of that team, and we can do a conference
Right.
call, and we can say, hey Chip, hey Gary, what do you think that we should be doing now, right? And just help them get, and I'm just throwing this off the top of
Right.
my head, right? Because these are things that, that are out there and they're problems, and we have to figure out how to bridge the gap, right? I want to hire somebody who doesn't have experience, but my organization is saying they have to have 2 years. Well, I know that guy's hungry. So what can he produce that isn't that experience that I can say makes it, worthwhile for that
Right.
organization to trust in me, that I'm making a good decision by bringing him on. And I think that we need to start figuring out how to support each other a little bit better with that, because we know the game, right? This is not new. Organizations have been doing this for a long
Yeah.
time.
We're not saying anything as new. We're
Yeah,
not saying anything that anyone doesn't already know.
yeah. And so we got to start fixing the problem, right? We can't have the same problem for 20 years and still act like, you know, oh, shucks, this is just so unfair.
Right.
We have the brain capacity together to start to figure out how to do some of these things, right? And it's going to be tough. It's going to be hard, of course. But like Joe is saying, right, is that cert now ballooned in price because it became something that HR, puts on every single job
Right.
description for an organization, right? And now CEH means this, but the people actually creating the job descriptions may not know CEH from Security Plus, from A
Yeah.
plus, from you having a degree in culinary arts, right? They just know that they were told to put together a job description and these are the skills and the roles. But what are the hiring managers really looking for? I can tell you, I've come across many hiring managers who don't give a damn about a certificate or a degree,
Yeah.
right?
Same here.
There's like they're like, I need somebody who's seen this before and done this before and is going to be reliable so that I don't get 3 o'clock calls in the morning or
Right.
4 o'clock calls in the morning, because I know that my guy is going to be capable of handling this issue, right? If we train him up and we make him resilient. But with a new person and somebody that doesn't have experience, see, then that becomes a cost
Hmm.
associated with that, right? Because it's like you have to get them mature up to a level in which they can actually start handling some of these processes, workflows by themselves. And they just don't have that time, that energy, right? They're dealing with things that coming down from above, projects, and they don't really have time to pull you aside and say, "Hey, I'm gonna block out an hour time so I can run Joe through this tool that I want him to take over, and we're just going to chop it up and see, how is he coming along with it, right?"
Man, that was a
They
hard
don't have,
tool.
yeah, they don't have the time for that. And so what happens is that, like I said, people, analysts, entry level guys are put in a very tough position, right? They want you to hit the ground running, but there's no ground for you to hit, right? It's just a hole, a chasm that you fall indefinitely. And they say, well, you know what? We're not even going to risk it, right? Because it's all about risk. And so they're like, what are the likelihood that this person works out and provides all the value that we thought that this job and this role should produce?
Right.
And if you don't have anything that can help them, right? It's kind of like investing, right? You got to have fundamentals here. And if that person doesn't have the fundamentals that you can look at and say, okay, I'll go ahead and put some money in them and watch them grow. What you're dealing with is just people who are just trading sentiment. They're trading the uh, uh, the trend, right? They're trading the trend.
Right.
And so at that moment, you have to really stop and say, okay, well, either I become trendy or I get fundamentals. And the fundamentals are going to be, well, what do you know about confidentiality, integrity, availability, non repudiation, right?
Right.
What do you know about that? How do you actually map risk to those things? So if there's any particular control or problem that can arise, what is it impacting? Is it impacting the confidentiality of a system or a data set or application, the integrity, the availability, right? And then how do you monitor it? How do you get logs? How do you make sure that when you see activity, that activity is authentic, right, and authorized, right? And I think that that's your base, right? And then that's where Security Plus really helps, because it hammers home CIA, right? CIA, it hammers that home. And then you can start looking at, okay, well, maybe networking, right? You need to know a little bit about some networking. Yeah,
You got to know how it works at least.
I mean, come on now, right? These systems sit on a network and they communicate with each other, right?
Yeah.
So how many people who are getting into IT security or in IT actually are also making sure that they're becoming strong in networking, right? And you don't
Yeah.
have to have a CCNP, right? You don't have to have a CCNA. You can get a Network Plus. You don't have to get the Network Plus. You can study to get the Network Plus, learn the material, and then move to Network Warrior, right? And then read that book, right? And then you can start reading books, but you don't have to necessarily spend money to get a cert, but you can study the material that those certs are supposed to provide you, right?
Yep.
Because it's not always about, you know, getting a piece of paper. Sometimes it's just about going through the process to get that piece of paper, right? Because
Yeah.
that's where you're going to find most of your value is in that journey. And then you can say that, well, I didn't get the cert, but you can hire me and have the
Right.
information. If you want me to get the cert, can you pay at least half for it?
Yeah.
you
I,
know,
I, I tell, I tell the guys that I'm mentoring, the ones that are looking to really get into, the security analyst level roles and whatnot. Um, Man, everything in that CEH you need to know. You need to know all of it. You need to know 100% of everything that is in that book, everything that's on that exam, everything. You don't need the cert. You don't need to go spend that money, but you need to know everything in there, you know? It needs to be like you need to have the knowledge to pass the cert, but you don't necessarily need to have the cert. And I think as an industry, you know, we need to recognize that that's more important. That's far more important. And especially for these lower level security roles, like, we need to have people that understand that, you know, I'm not going to be able to buy a license to logarithm and figure out logarithm, what to do with it, how to set it all up and everything at my home network. But I need to have someone that understands what DDoS attack is, what replay attacks are, maybe how that might look in a sim or something like that. And they need to be able to, take that sort of information. The hiring manager needs to be able to take that information and say, you know what, that's a good foundation. Let me build up from here. Now let's throw on the technology to give him the knowledge of how the UI works and how to actually configure that thing and how to work with it. But it's uh, it's
Yeah,
frustrating.
I know, I know, and that's the thing about experience, right? That really, it's not just that it gives you practical knowledge; it
Yeah,
lets you cut away the bullshit.
right.
It lets you understand where your shortcuts are, right? I'll tell you, working for an organization is shortcut galore. Everything is about shortcuts, right? Who wants to sit down and go through an entire risk identification process,
Right.
categorize, do risk scenarios, do threat modeling, get the risk score, put it in a risk register, come up with a risk mitigation strategy, a risk response strategy, get buy in from the risk owners on the business side, get resources allocated to it. And a lot of people don't got time for that, and they should because it's important. But
But they don't.
but they don't. So you can go through a program and learn everything there is to know about risk management and try to apply that to an organization you're in and see how far you get.
Yeah.
It'll
Even
probably be,
just
yeah,
even just knowing an internal process better than other people and knowing
yes,
who to go to in an organization will be, of great value. And I think organizations, they need to get away from, oh, this is a new guy, he's not going to be able to really contribute and things like that. I think as a new person in an organization, first you need to build up your internal network at that organization, figure out what people do, how they handle themselves and everything like that. And, just like you said, with the technology shortcuts and knowing all of that sort of information and having those shortcuts at hand, it's just as valuable to have those shortcuts in the organization, because rather than going through this whole queue that no one looks at, in ServiceNow, that we need to get a request pushed through for procurement. Let me just go to my security guy in procurement, have him keep an eye on this request. I will submit the request in 20 minutes and he's going to get the process kicked off. All because I had lunch with the guy, all because, like, we talk about sports or something like that. Like, I know the guy, you
yep,
know?
yep. Yeah, no, that's the relationship element, right? Where it's like you're still working with human beings, and human
Right.
beings, they respond to things. Most human beings respond to kindness pretty well, right?
Yeah.
And transparency, and honesty, and things of that sort. And like Joe was saying, like if you already say that, hey, this is coming your way in 20 minutes, can you keep an eye out for it? That may help prevent it from sitting in a queue for 2 days. And
Yeah.
and then you're following up with emails and you're like, hey, did you get a chance to look at this? And it's, oh, of course, I'm sorry about that. It's been busy. Yeah, well, you can't tell them it hasn't been busy because I'm pretty sure everybody is busy all the time,
Right.
right? But you can't help prioritize things for others, But then it goes both ways. Don't bring to them things that have a 2 week lead time, and then say, "Hey, can we turn this around in 2 hours?" Because it would make me look good if I can get back to that person with the answer, even though we have an SLA that's 2 weeks, right? Because it
Yeah.
makes the other person have to drop everything and think it's an emergency and they're doing something vitally important. And then you realize that actually, like, oh no, you were just helping that guy get some shine. And it's like,
Got to
I
have
don't
common
have,
courtesy.
yeah, I don't have bandwidth to give everybody shine all the time.
Right.
We all have to participate in our workflow.
Well,
So
where's my shine?
yeah, where's
Y'all,
mine?
y'all getting all this good publicity. Where's mine? My name better be on that slideshow that you present.
Said we onboarded these guys in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're over here with your hair falling out, like, man, that was a lot of work I just put in to onboard those guys, and your name is in the closet somewhere.
Well, yeah, that
So
was 200 hours in 2 weeks. Leave out the
exactly,
hours part.
exactly. So and as we kind of, I guess, like package this into that idea, right? Of okay, you're trying to get into IT or IT security, and you're either trying to get that first role, or you're in that first role and you're trying to figure out, well, how to really make that the next move, or maybe you're in a different role, you're in that help desk position like Joe was in, right? And it's not necessarily focused on IT and IT security, but you want to move forward. Like I said, I think we laid out some pretty good, ideas that you can
Yeah.
take, um, if there's a particular certification, like, there's the early ones, you can start pursuing those. um, and you can reach out, right, to people like Joe and myself. And there's communities popping up all around, right, where they're talking about these things, right, whether it's Reddit, or on Twitter, or there's Facebook groups,
Or right here.
or yeah,
Community right here.
yeah. And just keep asking, right, because everybody has an opinion, but I think that the more we have very upfront and truthful questions, right, the better we can actually get to that critical path, right, on how can we actually help usher in and help everybody get to where they need to be as quick as possible.
Yep.
And like I said, Joe and I, we've kind of went through it. I have friends who are in master programs now, and it's like, well, they'll get their masters, but they're still finding it difficult to take that next step. And it's kind of like, well, what is it? Was it the masters, right? Or was it the experience? And if they have the masters and the experience and it's still difficult, then what is it then?
Yeah.
Right?
Then it gets really weird. Then it's
Yeah.
like there might be something wrong with that organization because maybe they're looking for, someone with a CISSP, 15 years of experience in a technology that has only been around for 7.
Yeah. Yeah. You start seeing those really weird job descriptions where it's like, yeah, no, this hasn't even been around that long.
Yeah.
Um, and then it becomes an issue too with the budgets, right? You get a budget and you want to bring somebody in, but this person, oh, we want to bring somebody in for 75K. This person's asking for 90K. And the person asking for 90K has a security plus and they have a CCNA security. And they feel that, hey, I have a year of experience and I have these two things. I'm looking for 90.
Yeah.
And there's somebody out there who may have 6 months of experience and they can take the 75K, right? So you have to really look, right? The organization a lot of times is going to say, yo, it's the money, it's the
Yeah.
bottom line, right? And so in that situation, then it wasn't about you not doing what you needed to do. It was just that it just wasn't the right fit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good overview of this conundrum that a lot of us are in the industry that security is in. Um, it's a shame that we're in it, but we can absolutely pull ourselves out of it. We can absolutely provide you guys with really what you can do to be more successful in your career so that you're in the market competitively. You're not just in the market kind of just waiting for something to happen. You're making things happen. You're in a position where you can command the higher salaries, where you can go to a company and more than likely you're getting a job offer. um, so that's why we created this podcast. Thanks for listening, guys. I think that's all that we have for today. Shout out to Lu Kong. You know exactly who you are. That is an alias, of course. Shout out to Lu Kong for getting me way too many drinks last night.
That sounds like a good buddy right there.
He's a horrible influence. The worst. He's the worst. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll be back sometime next week. See ya.
Yep.